Hi everyone. Tonight, we begin not with castles or crowns, but with soil pressing gently against your hands. You are barefoot on damp medieval earth, the kind that smells faintly of roots and cold iron. Above, the wind stirs the treetops. Below, if you listen carefully, you can almost hear the quiet waiting. This is where it begins, not with ambition, but with fear, patience, and the understanding that sometimes the safest place is not behind walls, but beneath them. You crouch, letting your fingers sink into the soft, forgiving ground. Medieval people knew this feeling well, long before stone houses felt secure. Earth felt familiar. You probably won't survive if you imagine medieval life as all heroic battles and cozy hearths. Most days were colder, quieter, and far more uncertain than the stories suggest. When danger came, and it came often, you didn't always fight. Sometimes you simply disappeared. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. While you settle in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. Now dim the lights. Let your eyes adjust as the story slides downward into the soil itself. The medieval world above ground was loud with risk. Raiding bands moved like sudden storms. Tax collectors arrived without warning. Winters crept in early and refused to leave. You quickly learn that visibility is vulnerability. Stone houses attract eyes. Chimneys announce warmth. Roads reveal movement. But earth conceals. Earth forgives footprints. Earth swallows sound. This is a historical truth scholars broadly agree on across medieval Europe, especially from the early to high Middle Ages. Ordinary people frequently used earth-sheltered spaces, cellars, dugouts, sunken rooms, not just for storage, but for living and hiding. You weren't always planning to vanish forever. Sometimes you just needed to last the night. You kneel lower, imagining how someone like you, with no title or banner, would see the land. You don't think about architecture, you think about survival. Where does water run when it rains? Where does frost linger? Where do footsteps echo? These questions matter more than beauty. Here's an interesting detail historians often mention. Some medieval dugouts were built deliberately near large tree roots. Not to avoid them, but to use them. Roots reinforced ceilings, broke outlines, and masked disturbances in the soil. To a passing soldier or tax collector, the ground appeared untouched. To you, it was shelter in disguise. As you picture this, you sense the psychological shift of living partly underground. Above ground, you react. Below, you wait. Time moves differently. Sound changes. Even your breathing feels louder. The earth presses in, not threateningly, but insistently, reminding you of limits. Historians still debate whether these dugouts were defensive refuges or practical extensions of homes. Some argue fear drove their creation. Others say cold storage and thermal stability were the main reasons, with secrecy as a side benefit. You can almost hear that debate, murmuring in the dark, unresolved. You reach for an imaginary iron spade, heavier than modern tools, its edge uneven from use. Digging is slow. This isn't frantic burrowing, it's careful. Basket by basket, soil is removed. You learn the rhythm. Dig, scrape, listen. Dig, scrape, listen. The ground tells you things if you pay attention. A sudden resistance warns of collapse. A damp smell signals water trouble. There's a strange intimacy here. Soil stains your hands, working into your skin. Medieval people lived constantly with dirt, on floors, on clothes, under nails. Cleanliness wasn't the absence of soil, but familiarity with it. Underground spaces felt honest. No pretense, no polish. Pause and imagine the moment someone chose to go below rather than build higher walls. It wasn't heroic, it was practical. Perhaps a neighbor's house burned. Perhaps soldiers took livestock. Perhaps the Lord raised rents again. Or maybe the cold simply found every crack in wooden walls. Whatever the reason, the conclusion was the same. The ground offers steadiness. A fringe theory, less widely accepted but intriguing, suggests some medieval communities intentionally planned clusters of hidden dugouts, forming silent villages beneath visible ones. Not everyone agrees, but archaeological hints suggest more coordination than once thought. Imagine paths underground mirroring those above, secret yet shared. The world above grows softer. Wind, distant voices, animals. They're muffled now, as if wrapped in wool. This is the appeal. Earth becomes ally, not obstacle. You realize that living underground changes your sense of permanence. Stone promises longevity but draws attention. Earth offers forgetfulness. A collapsed entrance simply heals itself. In a world where memory can be dangerous, being forgotten is safety. You lie back against packed soil walls. Listening. You're not hiding because you are weak. You hide because you are patient. Medieval survival often favored those who could wait quietly longer than danger could afford. Above, the night deepens. Below, the temperature remains steady, cool but not cruel. The earth has its own logic, and you begin to trust it. Going underground is not only an act of desperation. It is a skill, a tradition, a quiet conversation between human and land, layer by layer, as you explore the medieval world. Knees pressed into soil that still holds the day's chill, you realize fear doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It creeps. It settles. It teaches habits. One of them is knowing when not to be seen. Above ground, danger has many faces. You learn to recognize them long before they reach you. The distant barking of dogs at the wrong hour. The sudden silence of birds. Hooves when no travelers are expected. Fear sharpens your hearing, then your judgment. You begin to understand why so many chose to dig rather than flee. Running exposes you. Roads funnel you. Forests can be harsh. But the ground beneath your own home, your own field, your own tree line, belongs to you. It asks no questions. Demands no loyalty. It simply waits. This is a widely accepted historical reality that quietly shaped daily life. In many parts of medieval Europe, borderlands, forest edges, regions prone to raids, people relied less on fortifications and more on familiarity. Knowing where to hide mattered more than knowing how to fight. You watch smoke rise from a nearby settlement. Not panic, just information. You don't grab weapons. You don't shout. You prepare the space below. The decision feels heavy but calm. Fear doesn't always feel like terror. It can feel like clarity. The ground becomes a promise, because everything above it is temporary. Lords change. Borders shift. Armies pass through, leaving only footprints and ash behind. Taxes rise without explanation. Food vanishes in winter. Yet the earth itself remains unchanged. There is a practical logic to medieval fear that modern perspectives often overlook. You are not hiding from monsters. You are hiding from systems, forces that do not care whether you survive, from men who see grain and livestock before they see faces. Digging is not an act of cowardice. It is an act of calculation. Historical records and oral traditions reveal that some families prepared underground spaces well in advance of need. These were not hastily built panic shelters. They were gradual projects, expanded season by season, deeper, wider, like saving coins, but in soil. The patience in this process is palpable. Fear does not rush, it instructs. Move quietly. Avoid obvious piles of soil. Spread it thin. Carry it away in baskets, scatter it under leaves or along riverbanks. Every action is deliberate. You are not merely constructing a space, you are erasing evidence. Scholars still debate how common this practice was. Some argue written accounts exaggerate it, as fear makes stories memorable. Others suggest archaeology underrepresents these shelters because well-built dugouts leave almost no trace. Likely, the truth lies somewhere in between, buried, yet present. Shift your weight, and imagine the sounds of fear. Above ground, it is chaotic, shouting, clashing metal, panicked animals. Below ground, fear is different. It hums, waits, listens. You mark time by footsteps overhead, voices passing, silence returning. Winter fear is quieter but heavier. Cold does not raid, it presses into walls and bones. When the wind finds every crack in a wooden house, going underground is not secrecy, it is insulation. The earth holds a steady temperature, almost generous compared to frozen air. Here, you are not hiding from people but from the season itself. This practical insight is confirmed repeatedly. Earth-sheltered spaces maintain stable temperatures year-round, warmer than winter air, cooler than summer heat. Medieval people did not need instruments to know this. They learned it by living it. You do the same now, through experience. Fear has another edge. Disease spreads silently through villages. Rumors outpace illness. A cough, a death, whispers of curses or bad air. Going underground can feel safer, even if the logic is imperfect. Fear does not require accuracy, it requires relief. Scholars suggest underground spaces also had psychological value. Being enclosed limits panic. When you cannot run in 10 directions, you stop struggling. You sit, breathe, endure. Children learn these lessons early. When to be quiet, how to move without scraping walls, how to listen for changes. Fear became part of education, not through lectures, but through routine. When the signal comes, you go below. No speeches, no heroism, just repetition. Just knowing where to place your feet in the dark, trusting that waiting can be the strongest response. Above, the world continues to threaten without concern. Below, fear becomes manageable, contained. You are not braver underground, you are wiser. As soil cools your palms and your imagined space solidifies, you realize something essential. Medieval people did not build dugouts out of love for darkness. They built them because fear showed where survival lived. Once learned, that lesson is unforgettable. You move deliberately, not because the ground resists, but because location matters more than speed. A dugout lives or dies by its placement. Walking along the forest edge, boots brushing needles and damp leaves, you sense the land speaking. You are not seeking the lowest point, that invites water, nor the highest, that exposes you. Gentle slopes, where rain runs naturally, are ideal. A shallow incline carries moisture away, keeping your shelter dry. Archaeological evidence confirms this. Sunken dwellings and hidden dugouts often sit near ridges or hillsides, not flat fields. People learned through experience that water is a patient enemy. It never tires, never leaves. Pause by a stand of old trees, roots snaking across the surface. Not a problem, but an advantage. Roots disrupt soil patterns, hiding disturbance, and stabilize ceilings. You imagine digging carefully, treating roots as allies. Leaf litter can conceal subtle ground changes and footprints, keeping your shelter invisible after danger passes. Press your palm against the soil. It should be firm but workable. Sandy soil collapses easily, heavy clay retains water. Dark, crumbly loam is best. Medieval people knew soil by feel, not by scientific terms. You do the same. Sound matters too. Stamp lightly. A dull thud is ideal, hollow echoes give you away. Footsteps above should be ordinary, unremarkable. Proximity is crucial. Too close to home risks discovery, too far is dangerous. Many dugouts were placed near routine activity, woodpiles, hedgerows, animal pens, blending into daily life. Walking to fetch firewood or checking a fence drew no attention. Scholars debate whether this blending was intentional or practical, but evidence supports both explanations. Survival blurs the line between habit and design. Light matters. Sun dries soil and reveals disturbance. Shade stabilizes moisture and softens shadows. A bush or fallen log can hide a shelter entrance. Some builders even delayed completing entrances until danger was near, ready but invisible until needed. Then, once sealed, the dugout disappeared into the landscape. You imagine that relief, knowing your refuge exists, unseen, waiting. The land itself becomes part of your plan. You are no longer separate from this place. You inhabit it briefly, trusting it to keep your secret. Smell reaches your mind next. Smoke, waste, food, bodies, all rising. A poorly placed dugout reveals itself through scent long before sight. Choosing locations downwind from common paths reduces risk. Earth absorbs some odors, but not all. Medieval people were attentive to prevailing winds, even if they didn't name them. You feel the breeze now, gentle but constant, and store that information. The forest edge offers another benefit. Sound behaves unpredictably among trees. Footsteps scatter. Voices fragment. Even if someone passes nearby, Conversations dissolve into murmur. You picture lying still below, listening as sounds above blur into meaningless noise. Not all dugouts were in the countryside. In towns, hidden spaces appeared beneath workshops, taverns, and even churches. There, selection depended less on terrain and more on human movement. Noise and traffic masked activity. What mattered was access and discretion. Urban secrecy leaves fewer records. Some scholars believe many such spaces went entirely undocumented, destroyed, or simply unacknowledged. Secrecy protects itself by erasing its story. You step back and observe the imagined site: slope, trees, soil, sound, smell, habit. Each factor layers together. No single choice ensures safety, but combined, they create obscurity. Obscurity, more than strength, is the goal. A subtle truth emerges. Choosing a site isn't only about hiding from others. It's about enduring life underground. Claustrophobia, dampness, darkness, poor locations make every hour heavier. A good site allows waiting without panic. You picture returning repeatedly, maintaining and trusting it. It becomes familiar, comforting, not for pleasure, but for predictability. In the medieval world, predictability is rare. As you settle on the spot, quiet satisfaction follows careful choice. The ground accepts you. Trees stand indifferent but useful. The slope promises dryness. Nothing marks the location. Nothing gives it away. Kneeling, ready to shape the space below, you understand secrecy begins long before digging, with the right ground, already skilled at keeping secrets. You return with minimal belongings, because medieval digging is about persistence, not abundance. Your tools are simple, worn smooth through years of use. An iron spade with a slightly uneven edge, a wooden shovel reinforced with metal bands, a wicker basket that creaks softly when full. None are impressive, but each knows its job. You kneel and press the spade into the earth for the first cut. The sound is dull, muted. Unlike striking stone, sharp noises carry. Earth absorbs sound like cloth absorbs breath. This is why people trusted digging more than building. Quiet, controlled work, unnoticed. Iron tools became increasingly common in rural medieval life. Even peasants relied on hoes, spades, mattocks, and simple picks. Using them to dig a shelter isn't extraordinary, it extends daily labor. You lift soil carefully in small amounts. Each basket is carried away, scattered among leaves, dumped in streams, or spread where disturbed soil won't attract attention. Digging underground teaches you to think backwards. The hole is half the work. Removing soil without a trace is equally important. Your hands blister. Your back aches. Medieval labor leaves no room for romantic notions of craft. This is endurance, not artistry. You pause often, listening, feeling vibrations, checking the air's scent. Fresh soil is clean, wet soil signals trouble. You shape walls deliberately. Straight edges collapse more easily, rounded corners hold. Gentle curves distribute pressure naturally. Builders across medieval Europe achieved stable forms through experience and trial, often without formal knowledge. Wood is crucial. Walls are rarely bare earth. Posts, planks, and woven branches reinforce ceilings and line sides. You select timber carefully. Oak if possible, hazel or willow for flexibility. Fresh wood bends, old wood snaps. Posts are wedged and tested with your weight. The ceiling is the greatest danger. Collapse happens without warning. You work top-down. Dig, support, dig, support. The rhythm becomes meditative. Some sites show intentional rough tool marks inside dugouts. Not carelessness. Smooth walls trap moisture, rough ones let it drip. Survival hides in details like this, unnoticed until they save your life. You rest against the cool wall. Temperature is steady, neither warm nor cold. This consistency is a great advantage of earth shelters. Medieval diggers often timed work seasonally, late summer or early autumn when soil is dry and stable. Winter risks frozen ground, spring invites collapse. Timing matters as much as technique. You imagine working by lamplight, shielded flame, swallowed by earth. Light is precious. Too much smoke gives you away, too little risks injury. Balance becomes instinct. You level the floor, slope it slightly to guide water. Even simple drainage ensures usability over disaster. Some medieval dugouts include small niches in walls, for lamps, tools, food, or religious items. Keeping floors clear and movement quiet matters. Every inch counts. The earth presses in as the space forms, not frightening but reassuring. Above, the world is unpredictable. Below, every inch exists because you placed it. Control is rare in medieval life. Underground, you reclaim some. Estimates for digging vary, weeks intermittently, or months across seasons. Both feel plausible. Dig when possible, stop when necessary. No deadline except survival. Sweat wiped carefully, habits form quickly. You move deliberately, respecting the space. The shelter demands cooperation. You test the ceiling. Press upward gently, it holds. Posts do their work. Soil settles. Nothing moves. This moment of stillness feels earned. You sit quietly and listen. The earth hums softly, a sound rarely heard above ground. As the space grows, a shift occurs. What started as digging now feels like inhabiting. The shelter is no longer just an idea. It is a place shaped by effort, restraint, and inherited knowledge, passed down without writing. You begin to understand why these shelters rarely followed identical designs. Each adapted to its soil, its tools, its builder. There were no formal plans, only principles: stability, silence, concealment. You press your hand against the wall, feeling the cool firmness beneath your palm. This earth will remember your touch long after you leave, and if your work is done well, no one else ever will. You pause before digging deeper, knowing the real risk starts now. Shallow holes are easy. Danger comes when the weight of the earth above becomes significant. Medieval builders learned this through collapse, injury, and silent deaths that left no record. You do not rush. You listen to the ground as if it were alive. Your palm feels for vibration. Solid soil resists, loose soil crumbles. The difference is subtle, but your hands learn it quickly. You begin shaping the space not as a box, but as gentle curves. Straight angles invite collapse, rounded walls distribute pressure. This principle appears repeatedly in surviving underground medieval structures. Evidence from preserved dugouts and sunken houses shows builders favored oval or circular chambers whenever possible. These shapes were practical solutions, discovered through repetition rather than aesthetic choice. You widen the space slowly, never digging more than you can support in the same session. Each scoop of soil is followed by placement of timber. Wooden posts rise like quiet sentinels, spaced carefully. Too far apart and the ceiling sags. Too close and material is wasted. You test each post with your weight, trusting touch over sight. Wood matters more than stone here. Stone is heavy and loud, wood flexes. Fresh timber bends under pressure rather than snapping. Medieval builders understood this instinctively, selecting straight, strong trunks that would yield without breaking. You fit cross beams into hand-carved notches, no nails if possible. The wood settles quietly, joints held by friction and gravity, nearly disappearing into the structure. Builders layered materials deliberately: beams, woven branches, packed earth above. Each layer spreads weight and dampens movement. This method appears in multiple regions, suggesting knowledge passed by observation rather than formal instruction. You crawl forward, advancing only where support exists. Digging ahead of structure is how people died. Lessons were likely shared quietly: do this first. Avoid that. You scrape gently when soil changes, feeling for moisture. Damp soil weighs more, shifts differently, and your plan adjusts. Perhaps a lowered ceiling, perhaps an extra post. Flexibility is survival. Underground, a calm settles over you. Labor above ground is loud and exposed. Below, it is intimate. Every movement matters. Every sound seems amplified. Breathing slows unconsciously. Some researchers suggest medieval ceilings were deliberately low not only to reduce labor but to lower risk. Less height means less weight, less air to heat, less space to support. Safety outweighed comfort. You carve small ledges into walls, not yet shelves, but anchors for future supports. Planning ahead prevents reopening finished sections. Once a wall is stable, it is disturbed as little as possible. Some excavated sites show abandoned dugouts that collapsed intentionally, indicating builders knew when to stop. Giving up wisely was as important as continuing. You tap the ceiling with your spade. Solid soil answers with a muted sound. Hollow spaces echo faintly. That echo is a warning. Reinforce before proceeding. Time becomes hard to track underground. No sun, no shadow. Hunger, stiffness, and lamp oil smell mark progress. Medieval people did not wear watches. Work ended when it had to. Fear of collapse is not panic but heightened awareness, sharpening every movement. Some regions reveal sacrificial supports, posts meant to hold weight temporarily, later removed or allowed to decay. This demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of soil behavior. Permanent supports go in corners, junctions, and high points. Everything else remains flexible. You smooth the floor again, removing loose debris. A stumble underground is dangerous. You imagine guiding someone through safely. Stability must be shared. Historical records are unclear about how often medieval dugouts collapsed. Written sources rarely mention accidents. Archaeological evidence shows sudden abandonment. What is clear is that fear of collapse influenced every choice. You sit back, letting the space settle. The ceiling holds, the walls curve inward slightly under pressure, not comfort, but security. Preventing collapse is a mindset requiring patience, humility, and respect for invisible forces. You run your hand along the wall, feeling no weakness, and allow yourself a quiet moment of relief. The earth accepts your shape. As you prepare to create entrances and exits, you carry this lesson forward. Survival underground relies on restraint, not force. You negotiate with the ground, not conquer it. Rushing toward an entrance risks everything. A medieval dugout survives not because it exists, but because few know how to reach it. The doorway is the most dangerous part. Walls conceal, ceilings protect, entrances betray. You imagine approaching from above. What would be noticed first? Disturbed soil? A shadow? A shape too regular? Straight shafts are easy to dig but also easy to discover. Medieval builders favored angled passages, sloping and bending slightly, forcing anyone entering to turn before seeing the chamber. This design reduces light exposure and limits sound travel. It also gives time if someone tries to force entry. Surviving examples show entrances were often narrower than expected, just wide enough for one person. The reasoning is clear. Narrow passages are easier to hide, easier to block, and easier to defend. Comfort comes second to discretion. You begin shaping the access tunnel carefully. Haste is dangerous. You dig downward at a shallow angle, constantly checking alignment. Too steep and slipping is likely. Too shallow and the entrance stretches too far, increasing exposure. Balance guides every movement. Medieval underground spaces often align entrances with visible features above ground, the base of a tree, the edge of a shed, or a livestock pen. This concealed the access while making disturbances appear normal. You imagine lifting a plank under a wood pile or sliding aside a feeding trough to reveal darkness below. In some regional examples, entrances were disguised as animal burrows, with loose soil, straw, and irregular openings discouraging human curiosity. The method is subtle but effective. You test how light behaves. Even a small opening can channel daylight if misaligned. You adjust until light is swallowed by a bend. Darkness becomes protection. Doors underground differ from modern hinges. Hinges creak, and metal announces movement. Medieval entrances often used lift-out panels, sliding stones, or layered coverings of wood, turf, and soil. You design a panel that opens quickly from inside and seals completely from above. Weight is crucial. The covering must deter tampering but remain movable. Many builders layered materials so no single piece was too heavy. Wooden panels support packed earth, topped with leaves, straw, or brush to restore the natural surface. Done correctly, the entrance vanishes entirely. Sealing the entrance, you sit in the chamber. Darkness deepens. Sound dulls. Your breath seems loud. This is the true test. Air must flow subtly, A hidden entrance is useless if breathing gives you away. You test tiny gaps, allowing air without light. Medieval builders often disguised ventilation as root channels or stone cracks. Some accounts suggest deliberate inconvenience. Low ceilings force crawling, sharp turns slow movement. These measures limit intruders and casual explorers. Use smooth tunnel walls, grippable but stable. Slipping would be disastrous. You imagine guiding others, ensuring every surface is safe. Debate exists over whether medieval builders prioritized speed or concealment. Some entrances are quick to open but easier to spot. Others are invisible but slower to access. Likely, the choice depended on threat type. Short raids favored speed, long-term threats favored secrecy. You test the covering repeatedly. Open, close, adjust. You listen. Settling wood is acceptable, scraping is not. Cloth or bark pads contact points. Silence is intentional. If discovered, panic is the greatest risk. Narrow passages slow intruders. Bends block sight. Movable panels conceal from inside. You rehearse these actions mentally. Some builders created false entrances or blocked shafts to distract attention from the true access, an example of deliberate deception. The entrance now feels complete. It is no longer just a hole, but a controlled connection to the world above. When the signal comes, you move calmly. The panel lifts, you slip inside, the covering settles, and earth returns to stillness. Footsteps pass overhead, the entrance keeps it secret. Experts differ on whether discovered shelters were doomed. Some believe discovery almost always meant disaster. Others argue concealment alone prevented most confrontations. What is clear is that entrances received more care than any other part of the structure. You feel pride running your hand along the finished tunnel wall. This was careful planning, observation, and respect for both human behavior and materials. Air is vital. Underground breathing is a skill. Air must be guided quietly. Medieval people recognized this long before oxygen was understood. You plan airflow as carefully as stability. Large openings invite light and sound. Small winding paths invite air unnoticed. You test with smoke, observing how it lingers. You carve a narrow, angled channel to the surface, interrupted by turns and constrictions. Air moves without sound, light dies quickly. Archaeological evidence shows some channels were irregular, slowing airflow just enough to prevent drafts from revealing the space. Comfort and secrecy are balanced. The outlet above ground is disguised, stones, dense brush, or a hollow tree base. You test it again with smoke, airflow works. Fire, however, is a concern. Smoke carries upward and can betray your position. Medieval underground shelters generally avoided open flames unless absolutely necessary. When fire was used, it was carefully controlled, small, and deliberate. Researchers widely agree that many dugouts depended more on body heat, insulation, and stored warmth than on constant fires. Earth maintains temperature steadily. Packed walls absorb heat and release it slowly. You experience this as your own body warms the surrounding space. When fire is employed, it is minimal, a shallow hearth or a single lamp, placed near airflow but never directly under a vent. Smoke disperses slowly, cooled and filtered by the earth before exiting. Patience is required here. Underground life does not move quickly. Imagine sitting with others in this confined space. Shared breathing is noticeable. Stillness improves air quality, while movement stirs dust and panic speeds breathing. Calm preserves comfort. The shelter shapes behavior as much as it provides protection. Some studies suggest medieval occupants timed underground stays to avoid air depletion, short periods during raids and longer stays only when multiple vents were present. Evidence is incomplete, but logic supports this. You would not remain underground indefinitely without proper conditions. Next, consider humidity. Damp air chills faster than dry. Ventilation regulates moisture as much as oxygen. You create a small floor channel leading toward the entrance to encourage moisture to move away. Archaeological findings indicate some shelters used absorbent materials, straw, cloth, charcoal, near vents. Whether intentional or discovered by trial, these materials trapped moisture and odor, improving air quality noticeably. The space is not silent. A faint hum persists as air moves, earth settles, and your breath joins the rhythm. This is the sound of safety underground. How people initially learned these techniques is uncertain. Some suggest trial and loss. Others point to observations of natural shelters like animal burrows or caves. Likely, both contributed. Humans learn by seeing what survives. You adjust the vent slightly, widening it by a finger's width. The air changes, cooler, fresher, but not rushing. Too much adjustment brings risk. Ventilation is never complete. It must be monitored. Seasons shift. Snow or leaves can block openings. Medieval people checked vents regularly, even during danger, as neglect could be fatal. You picture winter underground, breath rising faintly, air circulating just enough to keep lungs clear. Outside, snow piles and wind scours the land. Inside, the earth holds steady. Scholars debate whether underground shelters were fully self-sustaining or temporary refuges. Ventilation is key. Simple systems support short stays. Complex ones allow longer habitation. Designs suggest both existed. You settle, letting air move around you. Walls, ceiling, and entrance function together quietly. Air flows. The space feels complete. You take a final breath and recognize the value of something invisible, air. Medieval people could not ignore it. Breathing slowly, you realize survival underground is not about isolating from the world but admitting only what is necessary. Cold arrives first before you fight it. Underground does not guarantee warmth. It offers steadiness. Earth softens winter's edge but does not provide comfort alone. Fire solves one problem while creating another. Body heat accumulates slowly, walls are cool but not biting, the floor faintly cold. Balance is key. Too much heat draws attention, too little saps strength. Historians agree most shelters relied on insulation rather than active heating. Earth itself is a thermal blanket. Thick walls slow heat loss. Low ceilings trap warm air near bodies. Moving closer to the center of the chamber increases warmth. Laying down branches, straw, or mats prevents heat loss to bare earth. Above-ground materials are adapted below, not innovation, but practical use. Large hearths were impossible. Smoke would rise and reveal positions. Instead, warmth was controlled. A small lamp, a covered ember, something glowing rather than burning. Archaeology confirms restraint. Evidence of fires is limited, often small and localized, used only in coldest moments or when secrecy mattered less than survival. You place a shallow fire pit near a vent, not beneath it. Heat rises, smoke follows airflow without drawing attention. A faint flame shows balance. Fire becomes both comfort and indicator. Steady flame means stable air, flickering signals draft, dimming warns of suffocation. Some accounts describe heated stones instead of open flames. Stones warmed above ground could be brought below, wrapped in cloth, releasing slow, silent warmth. You imagine doing this at dusk, a ritual of preparation rather than reaction. Sleeping areas are arranged away from entrances and vents. Cool air remains along passages while warmth settles deeper. Shelters show intentional zoning, storage near edges, resting near the heart. Body heat transforms the chamber. Families huddled together conserved warmth naturally. Debate continues about occupancy, entire households or small groups. More bodies provide heat but demand more air. Balance dictates numbers. Clothing management is crucial. Medieval layers, were heavy. Too many cause sweat, which chills quickly. Adjustments are constant, removing outer layers, keeping extra cloth and straw close. Ventilation continues despite cold. Condensation steals heat. Soot marks low on walls suggest small fires kept near the floor, directing heat to bodies rather than the ceiling. Heat management was deliberate, practical, and continuous. Efficiency mattered more than brightness. You sit with your back against the wall and feel the earth absorb your warmth. Unlike stone, it does not reflect heat, it holds it. This creates a gentle cycle. The longer you remain, the more comfortable the space becomes. Sudden movement in and out feels jarring. You imagine winter above ground, wind clawing at walls, snow forcing its way through cracks, animals freezing where they stand. Underground, the storm feels distant. You hear it faintly if at all. Warmth becomes something you protect quietly, almost like a secret. Some scholars suggest underground heating methods influenced later above-ground construction. Low ceilings, central hearths, thick walls. Whether intentionally or coincidentally, the parallels are striking. People carried lessons upward when they could. You learn to sleep differently here, curled, wrapped, facing away from drafts, breathing slowly, fire dimmed or extinguished. Darkness deepens, but warmth remains. The shelter teaches trust in stillness. You adjust the covering over the entrance slightly, tightening gaps against cold air. You never seal it completely. Fresh air must circulate, even slowly. Moving cold air is safer than stagnant warm air. There is still uncertainty about how people balanced warmth and secrecy during extended underground stays. Evidence points to constant adjustment rather than fixed solutions. You believe it. The space feels alive in its own way, responsive. You touch the stones near the fire pit. Warm but not hot. You are not trying to recreate comfort, you are preserving strength. Underground warmth is about endurance, not luxury. As you settle into the quiet, the cold retreats to the edges. The center holds steady. Your breathing slows. Muscles unclench. You are warm enough to wait. And waiting in the medieval world is often the truest test of survival. Darkness settles like a second set of walls. It is not the sudden nightfall above ground, where moonlight still outlines shapes and snow reflects faint light. This darkness is deeper. It absorbs detail, removes distance. Underground, sight becomes suggestion rather than certainty. You pause and let your eyes adjust. At first, everything seems gone. Slowly, forms return. The curve of a wall, the outline of the entrance, the faint glow of a lamp shielded behind your hand. Medieval people lived with this transition often enough that it stopped feeling dramatic. Darkness became familiar, even useful. Historians broadly agree that underground shelters were intentionally dim. Even with available light, bright flames waste fuel and attract attention. Soft, limited light keeps the space calm and controlled. You move carefully, memorizing the layout with hands and feet. Underground life trains the body to navigate without sight. You learn floor slopes, ceiling dips, wall curves. Memory replaces vision. A small lamp sits in a wall niche, turned low. The flame flickers gently, leaving edges undefined. This is enough. You do not need to see everything, just enough. Oil lamps were common in medieval households for those who could afford animal fat or vegetable oil. Underground, their use changes. Lamps are smaller. Wicks trimmed shorter. Flames watched closely. Light becomes something you ration. Darkness sharpens other senses. Sound grows larger. The faint drip of moisture, the soft scrape of cloth, your own breathing. Touch becomes informative. You feel the wall before you see it. Steps are counted without thought. People oriented themselves with consistent markers, rough patches, support posts, hanging cloths. These landmarks replaced windows and doors. You rest your hand on one now. Whenever reassurance is needed, you imagine children learning this space, taught not to run, not to reach suddenly, not to cry out. Darkness becomes part of education, not fear, but expectation. Scholars still debate whether medieval people feared darkness more than modern audiences assume. Some suggest living without constant artificial light made darkness less threatening. Others believe fear never disappears, it only becomes familiar. Sitting here, both ideas coexist. You test light again. Even a small flame casts moving shadows that can confuse. You learn to keep light behind you, illuminating ahead without revealing movement at the entrance. In some shelters, reflective surfaces like pale stone or bone softened darkness subtly, reducing eye strain. You close the lamp and sit in complete darkness. At first, it feels heavy, then it settles. The walls remain, air moves. Darkness does not erase reality, it removes distraction. Time loosens its grip. Minutes stretch, hours blur. Medieval people measured time by hunger, fatigue, or silence above. Darkness aids waiting by removing the urge to watch. Soot patterns at certain sites cluster near niches, suggesting lamps were kept in fixed positions. Light stayed where needed, the rest remained in shadow by design. Darkness protects secrecy. A bright space leaks light, a dim one swallows it. The shelter becomes invisible through restraint. You lie back, eyes closing. Darkness inside matches darkness outside. The mind calms. Sleep comes easier when nothing competes for attention. Sound above becomes clear. A footstep, a voice echoing differently. You distinguish threat from ordinary noise. Scholars debate if extended darkness affected mental health. Some suggest anxiety builds, others argue routine offsets this. Likely, it depended on individual temperament and duration. You adjust slightly, careful not to disturb the lamp. Every movement is measured. Darkness encourages gentleness. You imagine emerging after hours or days below. Light would feel sharp. Above ground sounds louder, faster. Underground darkness teaches patience by slowing perception. You open the lamp just enough to check the space. Everything remains. Walls firm, supports steady, air calm. Darkness has not changed anything. It holds the space quietly. Lamp dims again. The shelter feels complete. Darkness is no longer absence. It is a tool, a companion. As you breathe slowly, surrounded by earth and shadow, you understand, medieval underground life was not about conquering darkness. It was learning to live gently within it. Moisture announces itself quietly, first in the air, a faint coolness that lingers on the skin. Underground water rarely announces itself. It seeps slowly. It creeps. It waits. Medieval people knew that even brief neglect could undo months of careful effort. You kneel and press your hand to the floor. It feels firm, not slick. That's good. Standing water is obvious and dangerous, but dampness is subtler. It weakens walls, rots wood, chills bodies. It is treated as seriously as any human threat. You recall your choice of location. You built above ground. That decision matters now. Rain follows gravity. Snowmelt seeks low points. By digging slightly into a hillside instead of flat ground, you already reduce the water that could reach you. This principle recurs in surviving underground spaces. Location does half the work before tools touch soil. You carve shallow channels along the floor's edges, guiding moisture toward the entrance rather than the chamber's center. Barely noticeable, they give water a path. Medieval builders rarely tried to stop water entirely. They redirected it. Excavated dugouts show these drainage grooves in positions that make sense only if water movement is imagined. The grooves curve gently, never cutting sharply. Water, like earth, prefers cooperation over resistance. Attention shifts to the wall's base, where moisture first collects. You pack soil firmly, smoothing it without polishing. Smooth surfaces trap water. Slight texture lets droplets run downward. This detail is common in well-preserved underground structures. Condensation forms near the ceiling where warm air meets cool earth. Tiny beads gather and fall. You adjust ventilation slightly to reduce humidity without chilling the space. Moisture control is continuous awareness, not a single action. A raised sleeping platform of wood and packed earth keeps you off damp ground. Even a few inches matter. Medieval people instinctively avoided sleeping where water settled. Straw and woven mats absorb moisture quickly, so you replace them often. Old straw is scattered safely outside. Fresh material takes its place. Clean here means functional, not spotless. Some shelters show stone or tile fragments lining specific floor areas. These resist moisture better than bare earth. They are not decorative but mark where dryness mattered most. After rain you test the space. Listening. Smelling dampness, which carries a heavy, earthy scent. Medieval survival relied on senses honed by repetition, not instruction. Above ground, water swells streams and turns paths to mud. Below, conditions change slowly. The delay is both advantage and risk. Problems arrive gradually, but linger. Monitoring is preferred over reaction. Scholars debate how often medieval people stayed underground during prolonged wet seasons. Some argue dugouts were avoided due to collapse risk, others point to drainage features suggesting long-term use. Evidence favors caution over certainty. You check wooden supports for rot. Damp wood darkens and softens. Early detection allows replacement. Ignoring it invites slow failure. A small sump near the entrance collects water safely. It drains or evaporates gradually. Excavated shelters often include this subtle feature, easy to miss unless observed closely. Managing water changes behavior. Movements become deliberate. Items stay off the floor. Storage shifts upward. Moisture enforces organization. Some sites show walls lined with bark or hides during wet months. Temporary, these materials shed water and protect earth's surfaces, buying time. You listen again. Water produces sound, a drip, a trickle. Silence is ideal, but predictable sound is manageable. Sudden new noises demand attention. After rain, you adjust the entrance covering so water sheds away instead of pooling. Small depressions collect moisture. Smoothing them is quiet, ongoing maintenance. The larger lesson: medieval underground shelters were living spaces, not static constructions. Those who treated them as finished objects suffered. Those who treated them as systems adapted. You consider winter. Frozen ground traps moisture until thaw, making drainage channels critical. Clearing them ahead anticipates seasonal challenges. Scholars note that fear of dampness often outweighed fear of discovery. Cold and wet sap strength faster than hunger. Feeling dry earth beneath you, this seems reasonable. You check the walls again, cool, firm, dry. Water is managed, not defeated. You settle back. The floor is solid. Moisture has not claimed this space today. Listening to the distant world above shift, soak, and freeze, you understand a key principle: medieval underground survival depended not on keeping water out forever, but on learning to live with it. Hunger is quieter underground, yet no less real. You calculate: how long can you stay? What can you eat without fire? What must be protected from damp, rot, and pests? Food storage is about preservation, not abundance. You choose placement carefully, not near entrances with shifting temperatures, not near vents with moving air. The center offers stability. Medieval people understood this instinctively, learning by losing food the wrong way. Excavated spaces show storage pits and niches placed strategically, grain bins in walls, root vegetables in shallow hollows, containers elevated on wood. Each reflects an understanding of underground air, cold, and damp behavior. Clay pot lids matter here. They breathe slightly, resist rodents, and do not rot like wood. Grain is packed carefully, every kernel matters. Stored underground, grain stays cooler, stable, and resistant to pests, a practice repeated across regions and centuries, explaining trust in earth sheltering. Next come dried legumes, beans, peas, lentils. They store well, cook quickly when fire is possible, or can be soaked and eaten with patience. Roots, turnips, carrots, beets, wrapped in straw or packed in damp sand last longer underground than above. They remain separate from grain. Moisture that preserves roots can destroy seed. Separation is survival. Several medieval storage pits show scattered herbs among food stores: sage, rosemary, garlic. These were more than flavor. Insects were discouraged and smells masked. Underground food storage focused as much on controlling odor as preventing spoilage. Consider meat. Fresh meat is risky here. It requires fire and generates waste. Preserved meat is different. Salted pork, smoked fish, dried beef strips. These appear occasionally in subterranean contexts, stored high and tightly wrapped. Care is essential. One lapse can spread rot. Food is kept in small amounts. Spoilage affects less. Medieval people understood risk intuitively. Scarcity breeds caution. Containers were tested regularly, touched, smelled, and even listened to. A hollow sound meant grain had settled. A sour scent signaled trouble. Early action was crucial. Remove compromised food before it contaminates the rest. Historians debate whether underground shelters were stocked in advance or supplied gradually. Some evidence points to long-term preparation, other signs suggest hurried packing in emergencies. Either scenario requires the same skills, understanding which foods last and how to protect them. The cold slows decay. Mold grows slower, insects move less. Time stretches. Underground storage preserves days or weeks lost above ground. This alone explains the effort invested below the surface. Waste management was careful. Peels, bones, and scraps attract pests and odors, so they were stored sealed until safe disposal. Often waste was carried out under darkness or buried far from entrances. Cleanliness was not for comfort but for invisibility. A faint scratch on the wall demanded immediate response. A mouse, perhaps. Traps raised, smooth surfaces limited climbing. Excavation marks on containers show where precautions failed, telling stories of hunger on both sides. Water was stored separately, in tightly sealed clay jugs, elevated away from damp zones. Spills destroy stores and invite rot. Lids were checked constantly. In some regions, people fermented food underground, vegetables in brine, grains into sour mash. Fermentation thrives in cool, stable conditions, preserving nutrition and adding variety when options were limited. Meals were smaller, chewed slowly, with minimal waste. Underground life taught moderation. Food was eaten to sustain, not satisfy. Preparation happened by feel, cutting roots, measuring grain, cooking without light. Darkness shaped habit. Some scholars suggest underground food storage influenced later medieval house designs. Thick walls, cool temperatures, separate zones for different foods. Principles align. Resting your hand on a container provides reassurance. Food represents time. Time represents safety. The shelter becomes a place to endure, not just hide. Grain is central, roots peripheral, meat high and sealed, herbs scattered, waste isolated. Disorder invites hunger faster than scarcity. Breathing slowly, the air steady, the walls secure, the food waits. Preparation replaces anxiety. Survival underground depended not on eating well, but on eating wisely. Food was patience made edible. Animals are noticed before seen, warmth without fire, smell not earth or smoke, a faint rustle. They are companions, invited or not. Medieval people did not always separate completely from animals. They provide heat, sound, and warning. A quiet shelter feels safe, but a shelter with living creatures feels alive. Bringing a goat for warmth, temporarily during cold nights, was practiced. Its body heat warms, breathing adds moisture and movement. Small livestock were sometimes kept in earth-covered spaces during winter, close enough to share warmth through walls or partitions. Low dividers of wood and woven branches separated humans from animals, controlling mess while preserving heat. Excavations show internal partitioning, suggesting deliberate coexistence. Animal movements, hooves scraping, shifting weight, become part of the shelter's rhythm. Animals react faster than humans. Sudden stillness signals attention needed. Chickens offered eggs, feathers, and manageable droppings. Raised enclosures near vents dispersed odor. Straw packed in corners insulated and absorbed waste. It was replaced often to prevent disease. Ash and dried herbs absorbed and masked smells. Smell, like sound, revealed much underground. Calm animals were essential. Panic spreads quickly in enclosed spaces, drawing danger. Movement was slow, touches gentle, speech quiet. Animals adapted to darkness faster than humans, learning boundaries by touch and memory. Watching them improved human navigation. Disagreement exists on how often animals stayed fully underground. Some argue rare, due to hygiene. Others point to repeated use in extreme winters. Likely, frequency varied by region, season, and necessity. Rodents arrived uninvited. Response was vigilance, raised storage, smooth containers, strategic traps. Shelters show rodent activity alongside ongoing control. Cats were invaluable, quiet, warm, alert, reducing rodents and providing a steady presence. Animals shaped human behavior, attention, patience. Waking easily, routine underground preserving sanity. Animal waste was managed, removed regularly, sealed until safe disposal. Some shelters had waste pits away from living areas, effective if not elegant. Disease risk was high in close quarters. Animal sickness often preceded human illness, serving as early warning. Animals also indicated timing, restlessness at dawn signaling safe moments to emerge. The shelter changed with their presence, a rhythm defined by the living, a coexistence of survival, observation, and careful management. Warmer, louder, messier, yet less lonely. Medieval life placed value on community, even when hiding. Complete isolation was rare and often harmful. You adjust the ventilation slightly, compensating for the extra breath in the confined space. Airflow increases just enough to keep the air fresh. You monitor it carefully. Animals cannot signal when the air is thin, you must notice first. You lie back and listen to the layered sounds, your own breathing, the animal's breathing, the earth settling. Over time, this chorus becomes familiar, a sign that all is normal. Some historians suggest that living with animals underground shaped medieval ideas about space and cleanliness. The boundaries between human and animal living areas were more flexible than today's standards. Underground shelters highlight this closeness. You imagine a long night passing. Outside, danger moves. Inside, life continues. An animal shifts. You shift. Heat circulates. Time stretches. You recognize that animals underground were not merely tools. They were participants, their survival linked to yours. Caring for them structures your waiting. You adjust straw bedding again, keeping it dry. You stroke a warm flank, and the animal responds calmly. This exchange feels ancient and familiar. Settling back into dim light, you understand that medieval underground shelters were not silent tombs. They were shared spaces, where human and animal breath mixed quietly in the dark. Survival below ground was not just hiding, it was about sustaining life, patiently and together. You learn silence by observing its failures. Quiet is not the absence of sound, it is control. You sit still, noting how the smallest movements alter the air. Fabric brushes skin. A knee presses the earth. A breath deepens unexpectedly. Each sound feels amplified by your attention. Above, the world moves unaware. That is the goal. Medieval people did not aim for perfect invisibility, but for ordinary. Ordinary sounds do not attract attention. Extraordinary ones do. You train yourself to pause before each action, not from fear, but from habit. Listen. This rhythm becomes natural. Children learn it early. Adults relearn it quickly. Silence is not instinctive. It is practiced. Footsteps above first freeze you. Then you learn to read them. Weight, pace, number. One person walks differently than a group. Soldiers move differently than farmers. Animals move differently from all. Sound carries information if you pay attention. Scholars agree that those hiding underground relied heavily on sound to assess danger. Sight was limited. Smell unreliable. But sound traveled clearly through soil and wood. You feel it now as a faint vibration under your hand when someone walks above. Placing your palm on the wall, you sense the rhythm. Fast steps indicate urgency. Slow steps suggest caution. Pauses matter most. They signal attention. You communicate minimally with touch. A squeeze, a tap. Language shrinks underground. You indicate rather than explain. Animals' reactions matter. Sudden stillness warns you. A nudge toward the wall signals vibration. Often, you trust them more than your instincts. You manage sound proactively. Loose items are secured. Containers padded. Tools arranged carefully. Nothing is left to clatter. Evidence in medieval shelters shows deliberate sound management, not through materials but through arrangement. You whisper only when necessary, often choosing silence. Speech invites mistakes. Holding breath was a survival tactic, described in some accounts. Slow inhalation through the nose, controlled exhalation through slightly parted lips. Fear quickens and shallows breath. Rhythm calms both body and sound. You listen beyond footsteps. Metal carries a different tone. Armor scrapes. Weapons clink. Tools jingle. Each sound suggests intentions. Not everyone above is a threat, but uncertainty is treated with patience. Scholars debate how often shelters were discovered by sound alone, sometimes by informants or visible traces, sometimes by noise. Likely varied. You learn to separate danger from ordinary life. A wagon shakes the ground but passes. Conversation drifts and fades. These moments teach restraint. You do not react to everything. Waiting is harder than hiding. Muscles ache. Thoughts race. Medieval people developed endurance not just of body, but of stillness. Silence requires patience more than strength. Children first learn through games. Hide, wait, remain still. Later, the game becomes real. You manage coughing cautiously, a dangerous sound. Sip water slowly. Press cloth to mouth. Medieval remedies often aim to reduce noise as much as discomfort. Silence alters perception of time. Seconds stretch. Minutes feel heavy. With no sound, there is no marker of progress. You ground yourself with breathing or quiet tasks, twisting cord, smoothing straw. Stillness does not mean inactivity, it is controlled movement. Archaeological patterns and shelters show where marks concentrated in specific zones, suggesting deliberate movement in quiet areas. You pick such a spot now. The earth settles as footsteps fade above. Silence returns. This is the moment you wait for, not celebrated, simply acknowledged. Patience extends safety. You count breaths, not minutes. Historians note that psychological strain of silence was one of the hardest challenges. Routine softened it. Both are true. First nights are toughest. Familiarity helps. You listen. Nothing unusual. Animals shift softly. Air moves through vents. These sounds form a safe background. You allow small movements, adjusting posture, stretching carefully. Silence has phases, absolute stillness under threat, controlled movement afterward. You follow this rhythm instinctively. Silence shapes trust. Everyone must cooperate. One mistake endangers all. Underground life reinforces communal responsibility without words. As hours pass, danger remains above. You rest in quiet. Silence ceases to be an enemy. It becomes a shield. When the world resumes its ordinary rhythms, you understand medieval survival underground relied not on invisibility, but on being uninteresting enough to be ignored. Hiding underground is not always about fear. It is sometimes preparation for something longer, heavier. War does not always arrive quickly and leave just as fast. Sometimes it lingers like winter, grinding forward day by day. When that moment comes, disappearing beneath the earth becomes a deliberate strategy rather than a reflex. You hear the distant echoes of conflict traveling across the land, not shouts or battle cries, but subtler signs. Untended fields, empty roads, smoke rising where it shouldn't. People in medieval times learned to recognize these signals early. When these signs appeared together, it meant danger wasn't passing by, it was coming to stay. Historical evidence shows that underground shelters were used during sieges and extended military campaigns, particularly in regions without strong fortifications or in villages near contested borders. Trade routes and rebellious territories relied more on concealment than on defense. Armies would seize what was visible, what was hidden often survived. You picture yourself retreating below ground, not for hours, but for days. Suddenly, the shelter changes its significance. Food storage becomes essential. Ventilation must work reliably. Waste management is critical. Every system you installed earlier now proves its value. You listen carefully to the sounds above. During war, they are deliberate, not random. Boots march in rhythm, authoritative voices give commands, animals are driven rather than free. These noises reveal not only the presence of danger but its organization. This is one of the most dangerous periods. Organized forces search more thoroughly than raiders. They know people hide and look for clues. Silence becomes essential. So does patience. Medieval chronicles describe villages that appeared abandoned during military campaigns, only to be repopulated once armies moved on. Though these sources rarely mention underground shelters directly, the pattern suggests large-scale concealment. People did not vanish by chance, they planned carefully. You imagine the tension of waiting while soldiers camp nearby. Fires crackle, metal rings, orders are shouted. Every sound presses down through the earth. You resist reacting. Any movement would give you away. You rely on the shelter to do what it was designed for. Walls hold, air flows, food sustains, time stretches. Days are measured by hunger and rest, not sunlight. Historians suggest that underground shelters were especially valuable during scorched earth campaigns. When armies destroyed crops and homes to deny resources, hiding below ground protected both people and supplies. What remained hidden often became the foundation for recovery. The psychological strain of this waiting is significant. Short hiding is sharp and frightening. Long hiding is dull and exhausting. The mind wanders, doubts creep in. Routine becomes your countermeasure, checking vents, rearranging stores, cleaning quietly. Routine itself becomes resistance. You notice how the shelter muffles distant explosions or collapsing buildings. Earth absorbs shock. Sounds that would terrify above ground become muted thumps below, softening both the physical and emotional impact. Danger is present, but it is contained. There is debate about the use of shelters for offense. Some scholars suggest they were bases for surprise attacks or escapes. Others argue their main purpose was endurance. From where you sit, endurance seems paramount. Survival itself is victory. You imagine brief, calculated excursions at night to gather information or supplies. Quick, quiet, deliberate. The shelter remains your anchor. You always return before dawn. Above ground is temporary, below ground is home for now. You listen for changes. Camps that grow silent may signal departure. Increased movement could mean preparation. You learn to read these shifts without seeing them. Sound becomes your window to the outside. Some medieval accounts note how people recognized an army's departure not by sight but by the sudden, unnatural silence. Relief came gradually. Managing morale underground is crucial. Fear spreads fast in enclosed spaces. Voices remain calm and low. Food is shared evenly. Panic solves nothing. Children present unique challenges. Long hiding tests their patience. They ask questions, and answers must be gentle and truthful without fueling fear. Medieval families relied on trust and reassurance more than explanation. The shelter itself requires attention. Moisture builds, air shifts, adjustments are necessary. War does not pause for maintenance, but neglect shortens survival. People made the most of what they had. Some researchers argue that underground shelters shaped settlement patterns, encouraging smaller, dispersed communities. Smaller groups could hide effectively, larger ones attracted attention. The landscape reflects this logic. Emerging after days or weeks requires caution. You move slowly, testing the air, lifting the entrance slightly. Light spills in, harsh and unfamiliar. The world above looks changed. Tracks in the soil, broken fences, empty spaces where homes once stood. The shelter preserved life, not property. That distinction matters. Secrecy was crucial. Underground shelters were rarely spoken of openly. Their value depended on being unknown. This habit of discretion became cultural. Returning underground one final time before full safety is certain, you feel the weight of history. Countless others waited quietly, patiently, determined to outlast forces much larger than themselves. In this waiting, medieval survival proves that endurance, not confrontation, was often the strongest strategy. You notice subtle differences in how people use these spaces. Though shelters might look similar, the reasons and behaviors inside varied greatly. First, consider a peasant, whose life above ground revolves around fields and obligations. For them, the dugout is insurance, a way to protect grain, children, and the body from winter and raiders. Their movements are practical, counting food, checking walls, planning a return rather than escape. Records show rural peasants often concealed grain underground, preserving survival beyond official observation. Next, a monk in a remote hermitage. For them, underground space serves less for hiding and more for separation. Silence already shapes their days. Darkness carries meaning. Sunken rooms might be used for prayer, storage, or isolation. Here, earth insulation, low light, and stillness are shared techniques with peasant shelters. But the emotional weight is different. Not fear, but discipline. Finally, outlaws, debt fugitives, rebels, or bandits. For them, hiding underground is a way of life, not temporary. They use shelters as bases, moving in and out frequently, their relationship with these spaces complex and ongoing. They focus on entrances and exits. Supplies are kept light and portable. Comfort is secondary to speed. Stories and local legends describe bandits disappearing into hills or forests, chased but never caught. Archaeology rarely confirms these tales directly, but underground structures far from settlements suggest long-term use by people avoiding society rather than defending it. You sense the difference in how such a space is arranged. Less order, more readiness, food packed for movement, minimal bedding, tools near the entrance. Even empty, the shelter feels tense. Scholars debate whether these spaces served specific social groups or were shared flexibly. Evidence points to adaptability. A peasant shelter one season could be an outlaw refuge the next. The earth itself does not distinguish who occupies it. Imagine these worlds overlapping. A monk offering shelter to villagers, a peasant quietly aiding someone hiding from authority. Underground spaces blur social lines. Titles matter less when everyone shares the same dark air. Behavior adapts. Peasants focus on group survival, monks on inner discipline, outlaws on awareness and escape. The shelter accommodates all three, but does not change them, it reveals them. Consider children growing up in these spaces. A peasant child learns patience and obedience, a novice monk learns silence and reflection, an outlaw child learns alertness and caution. The same walls shape very different instincts. Small details reveal this shared use. Farming tools beside religious tokens, weapons beside cooking vessels. These suggest either simultaneous use or sequential occupation, rather than strict ownership. Imagine discovering such a site centuries later. It is tempting to assign a single purpose, but the shelter lived many lives, like its occupants. Each group leaves traces. Peasants create storage pits and worn sleeping areas, monks leave symbols, candles, and arranged objects, outlaws leave minimal, scattered signs. Scholars debate whether shelters encouraged resistance or merely allowed survival. Hiding resources might weaken control or simply preserve life. Survival often comes before ideology. Trust is crucial. Allowing others into your shelter is serious. Peasants trust neighbors cautiously. Monks trust through shared belief, outlaws trust sparingly, if at all. Underground trust is physical. One betrayal can destroy everything. When different groups share space, tension is inevitable. Observation, silence, careful movements. Yet necessity overcomes discomfort. Cooperation is required, or the shelter offers nothing. The dugout is a tool, a neutral container shaped by its occupants. Earth shelters give nothing extra. They simply protect what is placed inside. Some scholars suggest these spaces preserved local knowledge during upheaval. When written records were destroyed, people survived and remembered, passing oral traditions quietly back into the open world. Instructions for digging, hiding, and listening were shared, knowledge formed by use rather than theory. The space is adaptable. It does not judge purpose or demand explanation. It holds peasants, monks, and outlaws alike. Underground shelters were crossroads, where different lives briefly intersected. Darkness equalized them, and survival bound them together. Life settles into rhythm quickly. Once fear dulls and novelty fades, routine takes over. Medieval people did not survive by constant reaction. They survived by repeated, careful actions. You wake without light, no dawn arrives. You rise when your body allows or when sound above signals time. Morning begins in silence. You check the shelter. Hands trace walls, feeling for softness or moisture. Supports are counted automatically. Air is tested with a breath. Everything that matters can be sensed quickly if you know what to look for. Daily checks were habitual, not formal inspections. Walls touched, vents cleared, coverings adjusted. These small actions ensured survival before danger appeared. Food is prepared quietly, grain measured by hand, roots cleaned without splashing. Meals are small, deliberate, and functional. Time stretches without daylight. Hours blur. Days are structured around tasks, not clocks. Rest follows work, work follows hunger. The body becomes the calendar. Hands stay occupied, repairing, twisting, sharpening. Minimal movement provides focus and calm. Idleness invites anxiety. Rest is light and alert. Short naps allow immediate response. Waste is managed carefully, containers sealed, materials organized. Cleanliness is survival, not comfort. Evidence shows repeated cleaning rather than abandonment, maintenance as daily duty. Children learn practically, move silently, feel walls before stepping, breathe slowly. Learning underground is immediate and embodied. Emotions shift. Fear becomes alertness. Boredom appears but is countered by routine, which steadies the mind. Survival depended on mental endurance as much as physical. Some shelters show evidence of tracking days, scratches, knots, small piles, though not universally. Familiar sounds above, birds, footsteps, become cues, informing safety and timing. Bodies adjust. Knees bend differently, movements shrink, posture adapts. Medieval labor-hardened bodies quickly accommodated confinement. Reflection, prayer, or practical tasks occupy time. The shelter does not dictate coping. It limits distractions. Shared space demands care. Resting in turns, voices low, conflicts postponed. Survival depends on restraint. Food stores are checked repeatedly, not out of forgetfulness, but for reassurance. Portions are adjusted to expected duration. Even if the exact duration is unknown, the absence of the sky is felt most keenly during moments of rest. The mind drifts upward, imagining open space. You acknowledge the feeling, then return to the present. Longing serves no purpose here. Gradually, the shelter becomes familiar. Darkness no longer feels oppressive. Walls feel known, and this familiarity eases stress. Unknown spaces unsettle people, even when they are confined. Some scholars suggest that daily routines underground influenced later monastic schedules and household habits. The focus on repetition, silence, and order appears across many medieval contexts. Whether connected or coincidental, the parallels are striking. Tools are kept ready but organized. Order is crucial. Searching blindly wastes time and creates noise. Every item returns to its place after use. You sense when it is time to emerge, guided not by sight but by sound patterns and instinct. The shelter teaches patience, but it also signals when waiting is enough. You sit quietly once more, breathing slowly, hands resting on packed earth. Life underground is not dramatic. It is measured, careful, and endlessly repetitive. In that repetition, medieval people found a way to endure uncertainty without being overwhelmed. Routine became their anchor. Doing the same small tasks each day kept the larger world at bay. Scent reaches you before sound. Underground, smells linger and settle into straw, skin, and earth. Medieval people understood this instinctively. A shelter that cannot hide its smell is not truly hidden. You inhale slowly, cataloging what you sense: earth, oil, straw, animal warmth. These are acceptable. Anything sharp, sour, or unfamiliar demands attention. Smell serves as an early warning system that never sleeps. Smoke requires careful management. Even a small flame produces it. Fires are kept low and infrequent, fed gradually. You observe how smoke behaves, how it thins, how it disappears. When it does not, adjustments are immediate. Evidence shows medieval underground shelters rarely maintained continuous fires. Soot patterns indicate short, controlled burning, suggesting people endured cold, burning fuel only when necessary. Smoke was a risk, not comfort. Lamps are positioned carefully, never under vents or near entrances. Light must remain low and steady. Flickering flames create movement, attracting attention, while calm flames blend with the surroundings. Cooking scents are also monitored. Boiling grain spreads scent, roasting meat announces itself. Foods requiring minimal preparation are preferred underground. When cooking is unavoidable, timing aligns with wind direction and external conditions. Rain above ground helps disperse odors. Medieval people often waited for bad weather to cook or heat their shelters. Waste is managed with precision. Human and animal waste produces strong odors quickly. Containers are sealed, absorbent materials replaced, ash scattered. Neglect invites discovery faster than noise ever could. Certain substances aid concealment. Charcoal absorbs odor, ash neutralizes moisture, dried herbs mask unpleasant smells. These appear repeatedly in medieval contexts, showing an early understanding of practical scent management. You rub ash between your palms and scatter it lightly, smell softens immediately. Small actions have powerful effects underground. Bodily hygiene is also critical. Sweat and damp clothing produce scent. Garments are dried near vents without blocking airflow. Straw bedding is changed regularly. Cleanliness is not about appearance but invisibility. Scholars debate how often scent alone compromised underground shelters. Some argue it rarely led to discovery. Others note that hunting dogs or animals trained to track humans could detect even faint odors. Precautions are taken. Scent trails near entrances are avoided. Waste is scattered away. Disturbed earth masked with debris. Medieval people understood animals' keen noses. You monitor animals in the shelter. Their presence provides warmth but threatens secrecy. Bedding is managed, waste removed promptly, ventilation adjusted to balance air quality and concealment. Your own body is also a factor. Stress increases sweat. Calmness neutralizes odor. Breathing slowly and staying cool are essential. Emotional control becomes part of scent control. You imagine someone overhead with dogs. The dogs sniff, pause, and move on. The shelter holds, not perfectly, but because every clue has been minimized. Medieval narratives describe people rubbing earth or plants on themselves before hiding, masking scent. Whether widespread or not, it shows how seriously scent was considered. Food is sealed tightly, grain attracts insects, which attract predators. Vents are checked regularly, stale air traps scent, gentle airflow carries it away. Freshness calms the mind underground, maintaining sanity as well as concealment. Emerging after days below would overwhelm the senses. Underground scent becomes familiar quickly. Memory ties strongly to smell. Shelters are remembered not just by shape but by scent, earth, straw, smoke. Some scholars suggest that scent management influenced site selection, using areas with strong natural odors, whether by design or convenience. You adjust a vent slightly, the air shifts, smells soften, balance restored. Silence hides sound. Darkness hides light. Care hides scent. Medieval underground survival depended not only on what could not be seen or heard, but also on what could not be smelled. The most dangerous clues often went unnoticed until too late. Life does not pause because the world above is dangerous. Underground, time moves quietly, without ceremony. This is most evident when considering children, not those hiding for a night, but those arriving for the first time, breathing earth instead of sky. The shelter shifts in your mind. Softer, more careful, corners padded, movement slower. It becomes a place where life begins. Evidence shows medieval people sometimes gave birth in hidden spaces during unrest. Travel was dangerous, exposure risky. The shelter had to suffice. You picture the moment. Pain managed quietly, voices low, breath controlled. Underground birth demanded calm. Panic risked sound. Sound risked everything. Preparation is meticulous. Thick straw laid, clean cloths ready, water kept nearby. Heat was managed carefully. Medieval birth practices relied more on experience than on written instructions. Knowledge was passed from woman to woman, whispered, remembered. You notice how the shelter's stable temperature helps. No biting cold, no harsh wind. The earth moderates extremes. This stability mattered more than comfort. A child born here enters life in a controlled environment. Even if the space feels confined, you notice the light. A small lamp dimmed low, just enough to see, not enough to draw attention. Shadows shift softly across the walls. The darkness doesn't scare you, it feels protective. Household records often mention births without specifying location. In times when homes were unsafe, this omission suggests some births occurred in unrecorded, hidden spaces. You imagine a newborn's cry, brief, urgent, dangerous. You prepare to muffle the sound with a cloth, apply gentle pressure, and calm voices. Medieval midwives excelled at managing these moments. Silence was part of care. You feel the weight of responsibility in that first cry. Life asserts itself instinctively. You respond quickly, not harshly, guiding the sound rather than stopping it. Life must breathe. Necessity is balanced with secrecy. The shelter feels different afterward, warmer, fuller, more fragile. A baby changes priorities. Food planning shifts. Ventilation becomes crucial. Cleanliness is vital. Underground survival becomes more complex, not easier. You think about feeding. Breastfeeding is quiet, practical, and requires no tools. Medieval people understood its importance. It sustained infants when other food was uncertain. Underground, it is essential. You manage waste carefully. Infant waste smells fast. Immediate response is necessary. Clean cloth replaced, ash and herbs applied. The shelter adapts again. Scholars debate how common underground births were. Some say they were rare, others argue they happened more often than records suggest, hidden by necessity. You realize how easily these moments could vanish from history. You imagine the child growing here, at least for a time, eyes adjusting to low light, hands learning the walls, sounds becoming familiar. The underground becomes normal before the outside world ever is. Naming, ceremonies, and blessings are quiet, altered by circumstance. Medieval life adapted rituals, meaning condensed but did not vanish. Adults behave differently around a newborn underground. Movements are gentler, voices softer, patience deeper. The shelter becomes not just a refuge, but a space of shared purpose. Illness is a constant worry. Infants are vulnerable, dampness and cold threaten them more than adults. Bedding is adjusted, warmth increased slightly, air monitored carefully. The margin for error narrows. Medieval people lived close to loss. Infant mortality was high even above ground. Underground did not guarantee safety, it offered possibility. Sometimes that was enough. You imagine the child's first memory, darkness and warmth rather than open sky. Humans adapt. The body learns from what it is given. You picture the first time the child is carried above ground. Light is sharp, air expansive, sounds overwhelming. The underground becomes memory, not home. There is quiet strength in knowing life continued, not heroically, not defiantly, but simply because stopping was not an option. Underground shelters were not only places of fear and waiting, they were places where life insisted on moving forward. Birth did not wait for peace. You imagine generations linked by these moments. A grandmother born underground during war, a mother hiding underground during famine, a child carried into a changed world. Hidden beginnings shaped family stories, remembered though not written. The earth itself became part of lineage. The shelter feels different now, less like a hole, more like a womb, temporary, protective, necessary. Medieval underground life was not only survival, it was continuity. Even in darkness and silence, life found space to begin. One of the quietest acts of defiance was simply allowing life to continue. Shadows cling to corners, walls seem to remember more than imagined. Whispers of superstition and belief linger, alongside practical survival lessons. Medieval people carried fear and wonder into these spaces, blending caution with ritual. You imagine hushed voices sharing tales of spirits above or unseen watchers below. Not everyone believed, some treated stories as warnings, others as truths. Superstition shaped behavior. Where to dig, when to move, how to act under stress. Folklore and surviving accounts show symbolic protections and shelters. Charms, amulets, carved crosses, herbs hung to ward off evil. Objects offered mental buffers against fear, helping inhabitants maintain focus. You notice how superstition affects you now. Imagine spirits demand awareness. You move carefully, handle objects deliberately, acknowledging presence without panic. The line between caution and belief is thin but significant. Stories traveled underground. A warning whispered in one shelter could reach another village months later. Knowledge spread quietly, often without formal attribution. Excavated shelters reveal small alcoves holding talismans, near entrances or sleeping areas. Objects offered comfort, focus, and perceived protection. You imagine someone wading through a storm, drawing strength from such tokens. A small stone or cloth becomes a focus, mirroring ancient instinct. Patterns of superstition vary. One region favors protective herbs, another carvings, another small repeated rituals. Differences reflect local experience and belief rather than strict rules. Psychology and folklore intersect. Fear encourages caution, checking walls, monitoring vents, handling fire carefully. Children learn survival through stories, absorbing lessons naturally. Fear becomes functional, not paralyzing. Adults also adapt subtly. Shadows are watched, vigilance increases, mistakes decrease. Scholars continue to debate the role of superstition in underground living. Some suggest it served as a mental framework to manage risk, while others view it as genuine belief intertwined with cultural context. Most likely, it was both practical and symbolic, overlapping in complex ways. Superstition also fostered social cohesion. Quiet, repeated rituals created shared understanding. When one person noticed a warning sign, others responded similarly, allowing coordination without explicit instruction. Shared belief led to silent agreement. Long nights underground were punctuated by whispered stories, small tokens, and subtle rituals. The shelter became a space where practical survival and mental resilience were inseparable. Daily tasks, replacing straw, checking food, adjusting ventilation, were guided by habit, instinct, and caution reinforced by these tales. Medieval people internalized lessons without constant oversight. Memory preserved these experiences, with superstitions passed from one generation to the next. Even silent walls acted as witnesses, holding impressions of touch, movement, and ritual. When someone returned, they engaged with this accumulated memory. The tension between fear and endurance was constant but not contradictory. Fear promoted attentiveness, while endurance cultivated calm. Together, they created competence essential for survival. You sense this in your own body, imagine centuries later. The shelter seems to breathe with you. Tiny air currents, shifting straw, faint animal sounds, and the changing shadows of minimal light. These elements were part of both the environment and the ritualized life underground. Stories, superstitions, and habits shared a common purpose: extending survival, structuring time, and focusing attention. The shelter was both a physical and mental space, with boundaries defined by soil and belief. Its walls were both earth and narrative. Underground life was not simply about avoiding danger. It required maintaining focus, regulating emotion, and passing knowledge, practical or symbolic, from person to person. The deepest lessons were lived and remembered in the dark. Even with careful preparation, the chill is keenly felt. Dampness clings to walls, floor, and clothing. The underground space shields from many threats, but illness remains insidious. Survival meant more than avoiding raiders or exposure. It also meant managing the hidden dangers of damp, enclosed spaces. You check the bedding. Straw that is too wet can harbor mold or bacteria. You lift, fluff, and replace saturated materials with dry reserves. Above ground, medieval life also faced damp, but underground, even small moisture could compromise health over days. You examine yourself and companions for subtle signs: skin changes, brittle nails, slightly glassy eyes. These small indicators, unnoticed at first, could escalate if ignored. Medieval people developed sharp observational skills because formal medicine was limited and minor infections could become fatal. Ventilation is critical. Stale air accelerates illness. You adjust covers and vents to allow slow airflow without revealing the shelter's location. Air management was thus essential for survival, not just comfort. Excavated underground sites show that hygiene was a priority. Waste pits, absorbent materials, and designated zones for sleeping and work all reduced disease risk. Success relied on methodical effort, not chance. You prepare food with this in mind: clean grain stored off the ground, roots and vegetables kept in dry sand, salted meats wrapped and elevated. Even minor contamination could spread rapidly in confined spaces. Survival required foresight and meticulous care. Animals provide warmth and companionship but can carry disease. Bedding is refreshed, waste isolated, and proximity managed. Medieval households understood that animals were partners, not threats, when properly managed. Children and vulnerable individuals need attention as well, monitoring skin temperature, breathing, and sleep patterns. Comfort is relative, but protection is crucial. Subtle sounds, coughs, sniffles, shifts, are noted, and timely interventions such as warm drinks or minor adjustments reduce risk. There is scholarly debate on the influence of medical knowledge underground. Some argue survival relied on intuition alone. Others emphasize folk remedies and inherited techniques. Likely, both knowledge and instinct coexisted, guiding actions without written instructions. Movement is deliberate. Stretching, crawling, and adjusting bedding preserve circulation and prevent infection or strain. Food storage and fire management are critical. Spoiled or contaminated food can spread disease, while carefully tended embers provide warmth without revealing the shelter. Psychological health is equally important. Fear increases stress hormones, weakening immunity. Maintaining calm through routine, observation, and shared responsibility was essential. Extended underground confinement required constant attention to health. Winter above and limited resources below meant survival depended on organization, cleanliness, and adaptability. Smell, from damp bedding or food, influenced perception of well-being, prompting medieval people to use herbs, ash, and ventilation. Illness impacted morale, shifting focus from security to care. Protocols for early intervention and quiet action prevented panic. Each task, checking bedding, rotating food, adjusting ventilation, monitoring animals, and attending to individuals, was part of a consistent routine. Life depended on repetition as much as walls and earth. Chronicles note survival underground with minimal food and exposure, attributing success to careful attention to bodily needs rather than shelter design alone. Survival was practical, deliberate, and methodical. Attentive observation, subtle environmental adjustments, and consistent routines combined to sustain life underground. You recognize that underground life demands constant attention. Each day requires active involvement. Neglect accumulates faster than danger. People in medieval times survived through foresight, routine, and careful observation. You practice the same now, imagining their patience and focus. As you settle to rest, you sense the stability of the shelter beneath you. The walls are solid, air circulates, supplies remain intact, animals are calm, everyone breathes steadily. Illness is present but managed. Survival relies on diligence, observation, and subtle adjustments. Over quiet hours underground, you realize that health, like shelter, depends on balance, not heroics or sudden actions, but careful, consistent care for body, environment, and companions. This balance is as crucial to medieval survival as concealment itself. You begin to understand that endurance distinguishes survival from mere existence. The shelter provides walls, warmth, ventilation, food, and protection, but it cannot do the work for you. Medieval dwellers learned early that the longer you stay below, the more patience, observation, and discipline matter. Survival is less about reacting to threats than anticipating them, maintaining systems, and resisting fatigue. You sit quietly, noting how long you have been underground. Hours feel like days, days like weeks. Without sunlight, time stretches, and the mind drifts. Medieval people likely experienced the same. Time is measured not by clocks, but by hunger, fatigue, and the rhythm of the space. Awareness of subtle changes becomes essential. A shift in air, movement in stored food, the settling of earth, all markers of continuity and change. Examining the shelter, you note how everything you built continues to support life. Walls hold firm, timber braces the ceiling, floors remain steady, ventilation channels move air. Yet structure alone cannot ensure endurance. Human attention is vital. Daily inspections, minor adjustments, and careful monitoring prevent collapse, suffocation, or spoilage. Next, you check food supplies. Grain is dry, roots preserved, meat secure. Each container is inspected for moisture or pests. In confined spaces, small mistakes escalate quickly. Medieval people learned through observation that orderly storage is as important as the shelter itself. Minor negligence could endanger an entire household. You observe the animals in the shelter. They bring warmth and comfort but require care. Bedding must be refreshed, waste removed, feeding monitored. Even a small oversight can compromise air quality or spread disease. Underground life demands vigilance for all living beings, human and non-human alike. Shifting focus to personal health, you stretch slowly, mindful of the low ceiling. You adjust clothing and bedding to stay warm and dry, noting any aches or fatigue. Medieval dwellers likely developed routines balancing activity and rest to conserve energy and prevent illness. Every movement is deliberate. You inspect ventilation. Air flows steadily, subtly adjusted to optimize circulation without revealing your presence. Balance is crucial. Too little airflow increases humidity and illness risk. Too much makes the space cold or exposes movement through scent or smoke. Survival depends on actively managing this microclimate. Sound is another focus. Silence is an active practice. You listen for subtle disturbances, learning to distinguish normal earth creaks from approaching danger. Medieval underground dwellers likely honed acute hearing, using rhythm and pressure as an early warning system. You consider emotional endurance. Psychological strain from darkness, isolation, and monotony is as real as physical fatigue. Medieval people relied on routines, social support, and mental discipline for extended stays. You structure tasks, pace movements, and maintain focus to preserve mental stability. Waste management is essential. Human and animal waste is isolated, absorbed, or removed. Hygiene is crucial not for comfort, but for survival. Disease spreads rapidly in confined spaces. Medieval people relied on observation and intuition to prevent outbreaks. Every small action, emptying containers, adjusting bedding, moving straw, supports overall safety. You revisit storage and organization. Supplies are rotated, herbs refreshed, absorbent materials replaced to maintain air quality and reduce odor. Medieval people understood that order and cleanliness, while not glamorous, were vital survival tools. The shelter is more than a hiding place. It is a carefully maintained system requiring constant care. You monitor companions, human and animal alike. Their well-being affects the shelter's stability. Fatigue, illness, or agitation introduces risk. You intervene subtly, repositioning, managing warmth, offering reassurance. Social cohesion and attentive care are as critical as food or structure. You reflect on the interplay of physical, environmental, and psychological factors. Moisture affects temperature, temperature affects comfort, comfort affects behavior and vigilance, behavior affects sound, waste, and energy use. Medieval survival depended not on controlling each factor independently, but on balancing the entire system. Monotony is a challenge. Boredom can erode focus, leading to mistakes. You create small tasks, checking supports, rearranging bedding, measuring food, inspecting vents, observing animals. These tasks provide structure and reinforce attentiveness, training endurance in ways invisible to outsiders. You imagine the shelter as a living system. It responds to care or neglect. Human attention is essential for stability. The earth provides structure, humans provide resilience. Medieval dwellers understood this instinctively. The shelter works only as much as care allows. Long-term adaptation requires flexibility, foresight, and skill. Food management, hygiene, ventilation, warmth, and emotional regulation all interact. Survival is cumulative, relying on repeated correct actions and careful observation over days, weeks, or months. You listen closely, earth settling, animals moving, air through vents. These cues guide silent, methodical adjustments. Medieval people depended on such vigilance to endure. Hands resting on the floor, you feel the weight of responsibility in sustained survival. The shelter protects, but only because it is maintained. Endurance is active. It is the sum of daily choices repeated over time. Survival depends on patience, observation, and quiet diligence. Settling into stillness, you feel the shelter support you, understanding that medieval underground life relied on attention, adaptation, and unwavering care. Finally, you notice subtle traces of those who came before. Marks on walls, floor depressions, timber scratches, evidence of lives carefully lived underground. Running your hand along a timber post, you feel grooves left by repeated handling. These were not merely structural, they carried human intention. Every inspection, adjustment, or repair left traces. Medieval people left these marks unintentionally, yet they reveal the rhythms of daily life and the dedication needed to survive below ground. You study the floor, noting smooth areas where straw was regularly replaced and shallow depressions where feet rested, children knelt, or animals shifted. These marks are not intentional designs, but they reveal how the space was used. Daily movement, care, and routine quietly shape the shelter, leaving traces for future occupants or observers. You return your thoughts to food storage. Containers pressed into corners, lids scraping against each other, tools kept nearby, all placements reflect habit and expectation. Grain is rotated, herbs replenished, meat stored off the ground. These repeated actions form a map of human interaction with space. Archaeological evidence shows that such details help reconstruct activity patterns, revealing how medieval people lived in hidden environments, which areas were used most often, where sleeping occurred, and how tasks were divided. These traces tell stories words cannot. Minor soot stains on the walls catch your attention, not from neglect, but from controlled fires for light or warmth. Their positions suggest repeated placement of lamps or embers. Patterns emerge that reflect daily routines and careful attention rather than chance. Worn surfaces, smooth timber posts, compacted floors, and flattened straw record repeated activity and adaptation. Medieval underground dwellers understood that survival relied on repetition, and that repetition would leave faint, lasting evidence. Small niches in the walls once held tools or objects with symbolic significance. These niches were maintained over generations, reused, and respected. Their continued presence suggests practical and psychological roles, offering both access and reassurance. Even transient occupants, who used the space briefly during raids or storms, left subtler marks, footprints in dust, displaced straw, slight depressions. Every trace contributes to the narrative of human habitation. Scholars suggest that these traces reveal communal behavior. Patterns of storage, movement, and rest indicate social structures and priorities. The allocation of tasks, attention to hygiene, and care for others can be inferred from what remains. Small gaps in timber and stone, likely for ventilation or observation, reflect an understanding of airflow, light, and security. Functional yet revealing, these gaps testify to human ingenuity and adaptation. You imagine generations using the same space, modifications made over decades, minor improvements, reinforcement of supports, adjustments in ventilation, rotation of storage. Each contribution leaves a subtle trace. The shelter becomes a cumulative record of experience. Lessons in construction, safety, and efficiency are encoded in the space, benefiting future occupants consciously or unconsciously. Survival depended as much on accumulated wisdom as instinct. Concentrated where marks show where children played or slept, where adults worked or observed the entrance. These zones reveal routines and priorities. Repetition builds durability and structure. Patterns are invisible until examined carefully. Evidence of responses to threat is also present. Scratches, worn edges, reinforced posts, indicating heightened caution, perhaps due to raiding parties or harsh winter conditions. The shelter silently records these pressures, offering insight into human resilience. You consider the unseen, odor, microbial presence, residual moisture, all intangible yet informative. They testify to past occupancy and remind that survival encompasses both visible and hidden, physical and ephemeral aspects. Patterns of reuse, repurposed niches, reinforced supports, shifted storage, show how the shelter evolved with its inhabitants. Medieval underground life was dynamic, responsive, and cumulative. The continuity suggested by these traces is striking. The same shelter may have hosted peasants, monks, and fugitives. Each left different patterns, yet the space accommodated all. Earth absorbs these differences, creating a layered history accessible only through careful observation. You rest your hand on a smooth timber post. The shelter feels alive, not as a static whole but as a record of human perseverance. Each worn surface and carefully placed object communicates across generations. The earth itself preserves these subtle histories of adaptation, patience, and quiet ingenuity. A rhythm of underground life emerges, a cadence shaped by the space itself. Walls of earth and timber guide behavior as much as any instruction. Each day unfolds in measured repetition, checking walls, rotating food, adjusting ventilation, observing animals, tending bedding, and listening for changes above. Survival is deliberate, structured, and cumulative. Movement becomes meditative, kneeling to adjust straw, moving containers carefully, stretching to reach corners, testing airflow. Each act is small, intentional, meaningful. Underground life fosters awareness, patience, and attention to detail, as mistakes carry consequences. Light management is crucial. Flames remain low and controlled, enough for tasks without revealing movement or casting revealing shadows. A small lamp in a niche illuminates only the immediate area. Light is functional, not decorative. Sound is similarly managed. Every step, scrape, and whisper is deliberate. Silence guides behavior and sharpens awareness. Medieval dwellers knew that a single misplaced noise could undo hours of careful concealment. You inspect the food stores again. Grain, legumes, preserved meats, root vegetables, all intact. Containers are elevated and strategically placed to reduce risk from dampness, pests, or contamination. Rotation ensures nothing lingers too long. Every small decision reinforces survival. Mistakes accumulate silently in enclosed spaces, making diligence essential. Medieval people consistently applied this logic, turning careful attention into habitual practice. Animals played a role too. They provided warmth, companionship, and early warnings of danger, but required management, fresh bedding, prompt waste removal, monitored movement. Coexisting with animals teaches humans to move in coordination with other living beings. Shelters that included animals reveal the interdependence of human and non-human occupants for safety and comfort. Ventilation remains critical. Fresh air maintains health, reduces humidity, and controls odor. Openings are carefully positioned to allow airflow without exposing the shelter. Small adjustments have immediate effects on comfort and safety. Medieval occupants relied on observation and experience to optimize these systems long before scientific explanations existed. Hygiene is essential. Personal cleanliness and care of bedding, containers, and surfaces prevent rapid spread of contamination. Historical records suggest that regular hygiene significantly improved survival. Practices are repeated methodically, becoming both ritual and precaution. Observation is key. Subtle changes, airflow, moisture, sound, animal behavior, inform decision-making. Vigilance is routine, not constant tension. Medieval dwellers used these cues to anticipate problems before they escalated. The shelter itself becomes a tool for collecting and interpreting information. You reflect on the psychological demands of prolonged underground living. Darkness, monotony, and confinement test mental endurance. Structure, routine, and attention to small tasks provide stability. Both children and adults benefit from predictable patterns and shared responsibilities. Mental resilience grows through repeated, deliberate engagement with the surroundings. You observe the shelter for signs of use. Worn floor patches mark where people slept or worked. Small grooves in timber reveal repeated handling. Minor scratches and indentations show movement patterns. These traces silently testify to past occupants and offer practical guidance for present survival. You reflect on time underground. Without light or external cues, hours blend together. Awareness is maintained through repetition, monitoring, and observation. Medieval people likely relied on such micromeasures instead of clocks, structuring their days despite isolation from the surface world. Attention to small environmental adjustments is essential. Bedding is repositioned to maintain warmth. Containers are moved to reduce damp contact. Straw is rearranged to absorb moisture. Each intervention may be minor, but cumulatively it is critical. Survival underground depended on consistent, careful management of both tangible and unseen risks. You consider the balance of safety, comfort, and adaptability. The shelter shields against immediate dangers but demands constant adjustment to changing moisture, temperature, air quality, and the needs of both humans and animals. Endurance requires both vigilance and flexibility. You reflect on communal life. Cooperation, though subtle, is vital. Shared tasks, silent communication, and coordinated care preserve lives and protect the shelter's structure. Medieval experience shows that social cohesion under stress was essential for prolonged survival underground. You test your senses. Airflow, faint smells, distant sounds, subtle vibrations, each signals internal and external conditions. Attention to these cues ensures preparedness and reduces risk. Medieval people honed sensory awareness as a survival skill, detecting danger without leaving the shelter. You manage stress through ritualized tasks. Small, deliberate actions occupy attention, reduce anxiety, and reinforce control. These psychological strategies complement physical precautions, creating a holistic system of endurance. Repeated tasks foster efficiency. Checking supplies, adjusting bedding, monitoring animals, inspecting walls and vents, each becomes second nature. Medieval experience shows that efficiency, built through repetition, is as critical to survival as structural stability. You pause and listen. The gentle settling of earth, the faint rustle of straw, the soft breathing of animals and humans. It forms a quiet rhythm, a lullaby of endurance. Life continues deliberately and steadily beneath the surface. Reflecting on these routines, movement, observation, care, and attention, you understand that underground survival relied not just on shelter but on discipline, awareness, and deliberate repetition. Endurance, patience, and careful practice define survival in these hidden spaces. You notice subtle air and temperature changes as the shelter adjusts day and night. Underground life is a constant negotiation with the environment. The earth provides stability, yet shifts in moisture, soil, and seasonal temperatures demand ongoing adaptation. Medieval people responded intuitively to these changes to maintain equilibrium. Checking the floor, you feel for dampness or soft patches. Small variations can signal problems such as water seepage or structural weakness. Adjusting straw, shifting containers, and rotating bedding maintains safety and comfort. Daily repetition ensures continuity, preventing crises over time. Examining the walls, timber supports remain firm but faint cracks reveal stress points. Tapping posts provides feedback on integrity. Medieval dwellers developed intuitive understanding of structure through repeated interaction. Supports are adjusted carefully to bear weight without compromising safety or silence. Ventilation requires attention. Narrow channels carry warmth, moisture, and the scent of humans and animals. Even small blockages reduce airflow and increase humidity. Clearing debris and adjusting openings preserves breathable air. Medieval survival often depended on these subtle adjustments. Food management is vital. Containers of grain, legumes, dried meat, and roots are inspected. Items are rotated to prevent spoilage and compromised portions removed. Herbs or absorbent materials help control moisture and odor. Mindful care of supplies maintained both nutrition and hygiene. Animals sharing the space offer warmth and comfort but require careful management. Bedding is maintained, waste isolated, and movements monitored. Animals respond to subtle cues from humans and surroundings. Medieval dwellers adapted spaces to balance life with order. Sound provides essential information. Creak, footsteps, rustling straw, shifting animals, all convey environmental cues. Movement is deliberate, minimizing acoustic impact. Silence was a cultivated skill, honed through observation and repetition. Psychological demands are high. Darkness, monotony, and confinement challenge attention and resilience. Repeated tasks create structure. Achievements like securing food or reinforcing supports reinforce confidence and mental stamina. Medieval practices maintained control over uncertain conditions. Personal health is monitored. Clothing is adjusted for warmth and dryness. Stretching prevents stiffness and maintains circulation. Minor injuries are treated promptly. Hygiene routines reduce illness risks. Routine and vigilance safeguarded physical well-being in damp, confined spaces. Light is managed carefully. Lamps are positioned for minimal illumination to complete tasks while avoiding detection. Limited and controlled light balances visibility with safety. Medieval experience shows that strategic use of light enhances comfort and security. Waste management remains critical. Human and animal waste is isolated, absorbed, or removed. Neglect increases health risks and odors. Simple but effective strategies using containers and absorbents kept the shelter livable. The shelter's organization matters. Items are stored systematically. Sleeping areas are separated from work or storage zones. Movement follows deliberate patterns. Order in confined spaces reduces stress, prevents accidents, and supports daily routines. Seasonal changes affect the environment. Temperature shifts, humidity, and ventilation demand attention. Medieval dwellers observed long-term patterns to adapt effectively. Mental resilience complements physical endurance. Routine, attention, animals, and small rituals mitigate the strain of confinement. Structured tasks provide purpose, maintaining capacity to respond to threats. Finally, the shelter functions as a living system. Every element, air, light, structure, supplies, inhabitants, interacts. Success relies on constant observation, adjustment, and care. Zahid, this version preserves the depth and detail of your original, simplifies phrasing slightly, removes unnecessary repetition, and reads like a professional documentary or educational YouTube script. Medieval people survived underground not through heroism, but through disciplined attention to every part of their environment. You notice how the shelter absorbs human experience. Daily life leaves traces, worn floors, adjusted supports, subtle impressions on bedding. Over time, these marks record repeated choices and adaptations. The space becomes both a refuge and a living record of survival. You sit quietly, noticing subtle shifts. Air moves gently. Animals breathe. The earth settles. Time passes slowly, measured through observation and routine. Each moment is ordinary yet essential. Life underground demanded attentiveness to the mundane, which ensured survival. Here, endurance depends on a careful balance of physical, mental, and social practices combined with vigilance. Walls, timber, and concealment mattered, but constant attentiveness mattered just as much. You feel the result of your careful work as days underground extend. The shelter has supported you through cold, damp, hunger, and isolation. Every task, from adjusting bedding to rotating food, checking air, and tending animals, shapes a steady rhythm of survival. Medieval people lived with this understanding constantly. The underground space is not static. It responds to care, observation, and patience. You begin by reviewing the structure. Timber supports are firm. Earth walls remain stable. Ventilation channels circulate air, while drainage grooves manage moisture. Each element functions because it has been maintained and monitored. Neglect could undermine even the strongest shelter. Food stores are inspected. Grain, legumes, root vegetables, and preserved meats remain secure. Any spoilage is addressed immediately. Herbs and absorbent materials control odor and moisture. Sustenance requires the same care as the walls that protect it. Survival depends on diligence, both structural and practical. You check bedding and straw, noting subtle shifts from use and moisture. Adjustments preserve warmth and dryness. Even small lapses affect comfort, sleep, or health. Underground life demanded constant engagement and anticipatory care to prevent issues before they became critical. Animals receive attention too. Their behavior signals environmental changes. Bedding is refreshed, waste managed, and feeding remains regular. Animals provide warmth and companionship but require consistent care. Managing them is an essential part of daily routines underground. You observe air and ventilation. Openings are checked and adjusted to maintain airflow without revealing presence. Air quality affects temperature, moisture, comfort, and health. Monitoring it is continuous work. Medieval dwellers relied on touch, hearing, and smell to gauge ventilation. Light is carefully maintained. Oil lamps and embers provide enough illumination for essential tasks while avoiding detection. Shadows and flickers are managed deliberately. Balancing visibility and concealment reflects centuries of practical knowledge. Sound is monitored. Movement is deliberate. Conversations are whispered when necessary. Noise carries meaning underground. Medieval people developed acute auditory awareness. Knowing sound could reveal position, supplies, or vulnerability. Hygiene is essential. Bedding and surfaces are kept clean to prevent illness. Ventilation, absorbent materials, and consistent routines reduce risk. Health underground depended on careful observation and practice rather than formal medicine. Psychological endurance matters. Darkness, monotony, and confinement test attention, patience, and composure. Structured tasks and repetitive routines provide stability. Mental resilience grows through constant engagement with the environment, reinforcing awareness and adaptability. You notice traces of past activity. Worn floors, smooth timber, and impressions in straw reveal previous occupants' habits. The shelter preserves a history of adaptation and survival. Medieval underground spaces accumulate these traces, forming a cumulative record of human endurance. Children, birth, and growth occur here too. The shelter supports life. Careful management of warmth, air, and hygiene protects the vulnerable. Families balance children's needs with concealment and limited resources. Beliefs and superstition are woven into daily routines. Talismans, symbols, and rituals provide structure and mental focus. These practices combine psychology with practical survival strategies. You return to your own movements. Each action, adjusting bedding, rotating supplies, monitoring air, tending animals, maintaining light, controlling noise, is deliberate. Each contributes to equilibrium. Survival relied on this orchestration, where even minor mistakes could have serious consequences. The shelter responds to your care. Earth walls settle quietly. Timber supports bare weight. Air circulates properly. Supplies remain functional. The space functions as a dynamic system, co-created by structure and human attention. Survival depended on participation in this system. Endurance is cumulative. Survival is built from countless small, deliberate actions. Physical, environmental, and psychological factors intertwine. Medieval dwellers understood persistence, observation, and disciplined care mattered more than bravery or luck. Emergence from underground is calculated. The world above is observed, environmental conditions gauged, and supplies checked. Medieval people emerged cautiously, aware that leaving carries risk even after long periods of safety. You sit quietly, hands on the earth, absorbing stillness and the result of your effort. The shelter persists not by itself, but through care, attention, and discipline. Life underground depended on these commitments. You breathe slowly, letting your mind settle. Survival underground is not just about concealment, food, or structure. It is about continuous engagement with all elements, human, animal, and earth. Endurance, patience, observation, and care define this life. Outside, the day softens. Underground, time is measured by deliberate actions rather than sunlight. The shelter settles around you, absorbing your attention. Each wall, timber, and bundle of straw bears evidence of care. Life continues quietly, persistent. Even in darkness and solitude, your rhythm aligns with the space. Fear fades. Cold, damp, hunger, and uncertainty are tempered by routine, observation, and effort. Balance is achieved between human vigilance and the earth's stability. The shelter does not rush. It does not demand. It responds to attentiveness, carrying you through hours, days, and nights. You sense layers of experience from past occupants, those who endured danger, raised children, or survived shifting conditions. Their lives leave subtle marks that persist. You close your eyes. Darkness envelopes you. Body warmth and preparation steady the space. Breathing slows. Muscles relax. The quiet becomes protective. Every previous task folds into calm mastery. You are part of the shelter and a witness to its life-sustaining ability. Patience over time is the greatest survival skill. As hours pass in silence, you feel enduring assurance, the quiet triumph of life continuing beneath the earth. Sweet dreams.